alien girl left unclothed and pelted with garbage until the human covered her with his new coat. The marketplace of Dragatul mining colony reeked of sulfur and desperation. Amid the ramshackle stalls and grimy facades, a commotion erupted like a festering wound. Jeers and cruel laughter rose above the usual din of commerce as a slender figure stumbled forward, pushed by rough hands. Nilari Keltesh, once respected xenobiologist and now falsely accused criminal, felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she tried desperately to shield her exposed body with trembling hands. Her emerald skin, normally luminous with health, was now marred with bruises and filth. Silver-white hair hung in tangled disarray around her face, offering scant protection from the hungry stares of the crowd. Thief! Spy! Deceiver! The accusations flew like the rotten blue vegetables that splattered against her skin, each impact a fresh humiliation. Tears welled in her violet eyes as she stumbled forward, bare feet scraping against the rough stone. The colony's security chief, Barath Dren, watched from the sidelines with a satisfied smirk twisting his features. He'd orchestrated this perfectly. The troublesome scientist who discovered his smuggling operation would be discredited completely before she could expose him. "Keep moving, Greenskin," snarled one of the guards, prodding her forward with the butt of his shock staff. "Your walk of shame's just beginning." Through the blur of her tears, Nilari barely registered the tall figure cutting through the crowd until he was directly before her. A human male, rare in this remote outpost, moved with purpose toward her. His gray-blue eyes held not the leering interest of the crowd, but something else entirely: cold fury. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made even the guards hesitate. Eric Norton had arrived on Dragatul less than 6 hours ago, seeking mining contracts for his company. What he found instead was barbarism masquerading as justice. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his new leather coat, a custom piece that had cost him a month's salary, and stepped forward. "Sir, this isn't your concern," the guard began, but fell silent when Eric fixed him with a glare that could have melted Durasteel. With gentle movements that contrasted his obvious strength, Eric draped the coat around Nilari's shoulders, carefully covering her exposed body. The leather was warm from his body heat, the interior lined with soft fabric that felt like a sanctuary against her abused skin. "You're going to be fine," he said softly, adjusting the coat to ensure her dignity was restored. "I'll get you out of here." The crowd's mood shifted uneasily. This wasn't part of the entertainment they'd expected. Some began to drift away, suddenly uncomfortable with their participation. "This woman is a criminal," Barath stepped forward, his authority as security chief evident in his bearing. "She's been sentenced to public humiliation for attempting to steal colony secrets." Eric didn't bother looking at him. Instead, he kept his eyes on Nilari, whose violet gaze now held a flicker of hope amid the fear and gratitude. "Can you walk?" he asked her quietly. She nodded, clutching the coat tightly around herself. "Good. Stay close to me." Only then did Eric turn to face Barath. "I'm invoking Confederacy Statute 47B, which allows any citizen to request a formal review of colonial justice proceedings." "Consider it requested." Barath's face darkened. "You have no authority." "I have every authority," Eric cut him off, "and I have the direct comm codes to 3 Confederacy magistrates who would be very interested in your interpretation of justice." He smiled, but it was all teeth and threat. "Want to test me?" The security chief's hesitation was all Eric needed. He gently guided Nilari away from the dispersing crowd, steering her toward a narrow side street. Once they were safely out of sight, Nilari's composure finally broke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. I didn't expect anyone to help." "What happened?" Eric asked, keeping his voice gentle as he maintained a respectful distance. "I discovered something I wasn't supposed to," she explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Chief Dren is running a smuggling operation, trading rare minerals for weapons. When I found evidence in the geological samples I was analyzing, he framed me as an industrial spy." Eric nodded grimly. "Classic move. Discredit the whistleblower." "I have proof," she said urgently. "Data crystals hidden in my quarters. But I can't go back there. They'll be watching." A slow smile spread across Eric's face. "Then we'll just have to be smarter than them, won't we?" For the first time in days, Nilari felt something other than despair. This human stranger had done more than cover her nakedness. He'd restored her hope. "I'm Eric Norton," he said, offering his hand in the human custom of greeting. She took it, feeling the warm strength of his grip. "Nilari Keltesh, and I believe I owe you a coat." His laugh was unexpected and warm. "Keep it. It looks better on you anyway." "We need to get those data crystals," Eric said, his mind already formulating a plan as they huddled in the narrow alley. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and find you proper clothes." Nilari clutched the leather coat tighter around her body, acutely aware of her nakedness beneath it. The garment smelled of leather, spice, and something distinctly human, a scent she found unexpectedly comforting. "My research assistant, Elira, has quarters in the civilian sector," she suggested. "She's off-world for another 2 days. We could go there." Eric nodded. "Good, but we can't walk through the colony with you looking like, well, your skin color is rather distinctive." A small smile touched Nilari's lips. "Among my people, this shade of green is quite common." "Well, it's uncommonly beautiful," Eric replied, the compliment slipping out before he could stop himself. He cleared his throat, noticing the slight darkening of her cheeks, her species equivalent of a blush. "But right now, it makes you too recognizable." They made their way through back alleys and service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Dren's security forces would be looking for her. Eric's confident stride and authoritative nod to the occasional passerby created an illusion that they belonged exactly where they were. At Elira's quarters, Nilari keyed in the access code with trembling fingers. Once inside, she exhaled deeply, leaning against the closed door. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't—" "Don't mention it," Eric cut her off gently. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said with certainty. "They wouldn't. I've been on this colony for 8 months. No one has ever shown me such kindness." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Eric was suddenly very aware of how the coat had slipped slightly from her shoulder, revealing a glimpse of smooth emerald skin. He quickly averted his gaze. "You should find some clothes," he suggested, his voice rougher than intended. "I'll turn around." Nilari watched him with curious eyes before moving to Elira's storage unit. As she rummaged through her friend's belongings, she spoke over her shoulder. "On my world, nudity isn't considered shameful. It's the context that matters. Being forcibly exposed as punishment, that's the humiliation." Eric kept his back turned, staring intently at a scientific diagram on the wall. "Humans have complicated relationships with nudity. Context matters for us too, I suppose." "And what is this context?" she asked, her voice closer now. He risked a glance and found her standing just behind him, still wrapped in his coat, but regarding him with open curiosity. Her violet eyes held no guile, only genuine interest. "This context is—" he searched for the right words. "Inappropriate. You're vulnerable. I'm a stranger. There's a power imbalance." Nilari stepped closer. "You gave me power when you gave me this coat. You risked yourself for me. That creates balance, doesn't it?" Eric felt his pulse quicken. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and something more primal. He recognized it because he felt it too, an unexpected attraction that transcended species. "Nilari," he began, unsure what he was going to say. She placed a slender hand on his chest. "In my culture, when someone saves another's life or dignity, it creates a bond. We call it the breath debt. It's sacred." "I didn't help you to create any debt," he said firmly. "I know. That's what makes you worthy of it." Her hand moved slightly upward, feeling the strong beat of his heart. "Your species fascinates me, so different physically, yet I find myself drawn to you." Eric gently took her hand, intending to remove it, but instead found himself holding it against his chest. "This isn't the time," he said, though his body disagreed vehemently. "Time is precisely what we may not have," she countered. "Dren will be hunting me. Tomorrow is uncertain." The logic was hard to refute, especially when her free hand reached up to touch his face with gentle exploration. Eric had been with non-humans before. Interspecies relationships were common in the Confederacy, but never had he felt such an immediate connection. "We need to focus on getting those data crystals," he reminded her, even as he leaned slightly into her touch. "Yes," she agreed, not moving away. "But first I need to understand something." What's that? Why a human would risk everything for an alien he's never met? Eric looked into her violet eyes, seeing intelligence, courage, and vulnerability all mixed together. Because it was right. Because you needed help. Because that's what humans do. Or should do anyway. Her expression softened. Your species has a reputation for being unpredictable, aggressive, even dangerous. But there are these other stories too, of incredible compassion and self-sacrifice. We contain multitudes, he said with a small smile. I'm beginning to see that. She finally stepped back, though reluctantly. I should change. We have work to do. As she moved toward Elira's bedroom with a small bundle of borrowed clothes, she paused at the doorway. But Eric, this conversation isn't over. The look she gave him promised more than words, and Eric found himself both relieved and disappointed when the door closed behind her. Hold still, Nilari instructed, applying the last of the temporary pigmentation mask to her face. The silvery substance would temporarily neutralize her natural emerald hue, giving her skin a pale bluish tone common among the Vexari miners, who made up nearly 30% of the colony's population. Eric watched with fascination as her distinctive coloring disappeared beneath the cosmetic disguise. Remarkable. Where did you learn to do this? Xenobiology isn't just about studying other species, she replied with a small smile. Sometimes it's about becoming them. I've done extensive fieldwork. She had borrowed a set of nondescript workers' clothes from Elira's closet, loose-fitting gray coveralls that concealed her figure. A cap pulled low over her forehead hid most of her distinctive silver-white hair, which she darkened with a temporary dye. How do I look? She asked, turning to face him fully. Like someone I'd walk past without a second glance, Eric replied honestly, which is exactly what we need right now. Their plan was simple but risky. Eric would visit the colony's administration center, presenting himself as a potential investor interested in expanding mining operations. His credentials as a representative of Terran extraction technologies were legitimate enough to grant him a meeting with senior officials. While he created this distraction, Nilari would slip away to her quarters to retrieve the hidden data crystals. As they prepared to leave, Nilari paused at the door. If something goes wrong, it won't, Eric interrupted firmly. But if it does, she insisted, I want you to know that meeting you has been significant to me. The intensity in her violet eyes, now concealed behind color-altering lenses, made Eric's breath catch. He stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. This isn't goodbye, he said softly. In my culture, we don't leave important things unsaid, just in case. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt surprisingly intimate. Last night, after you fell asleep on Elira's couch, I watched you for a while. The way you breathed, the way your expression softened. I've studied dozens of species, but humans, there's something different. Eric felt heat rising to his face. Different good or different bad? Different fascinating, she replied. Her free hand rose to touch his cheek, tracing the contour of his jaw with gentle curiosity. Your kind has such a reputation for aggression, for dominance. Yet there's such capacity for tenderness too. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as he responded. The kiss deepened, transcending their biological differences, finding common ground in shared desire. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Nilari's eyes were wide with wonder. That was not what I expected. No, Eric asked, still holding her close. Better, she clarified. Much better. My species doesn't kiss like that. She stopped herself, a darker blue flush spreading across her disguised features. Perhaps a demonstration for another time. The moment hung between them, charged with possibilities and unspoken promises. Then reality reasserted itself. We should go, Eric said reluctantly. Stick to the plan. Meet back here in 2 hours. They left Elira's quarters separately, Eric heading directly to the administration center, while Nilari took a more circuitous route toward the research quarters. The colony buzzed with its usual activity, miners changing shifts, merchants hawking wares, maintenance crews repairing the ever-deteriorating infrastructure. No one paid attention to either of them. At the administration center, Eric was greeted with the deference typically shown to potential investors. He was ushered into a conference room where several colonial officials awaited, including, as he'd hoped, Security Chief Baroth Dren. "Mr. Norton," Dren said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I understand you're interested in our extraction operations." "Very interested," Eric confirmed, setting his datapad on the table with a deliberate flourish. "Terran Extraction Technologies believes this colony has untapped potential." As he launched into his presentation, complete with fabricated projections and deliberately complex questions that required multiple officials to consult their records, Eric kept one eye on the chronometer. Nilari would be approaching her quarters now, navigating the corridors of the research wing. What he didn't know was that Nilari had already reached her destination, only to discover two of Dren's security officers methodically tearing apart her living space. Hidden behind a maintenance panel in the corridor, she watched in dismay as they upended furniture, sliced open cushions, and dismantled equipment. "Nothing here," one officer grunted, kicking aside a broken scanner. "Keep looking," the other replied. "Dren says those crystals have to be found before the Confederacy inspection team arrives tomorrow." Nilari's heart raced. A Confederacy inspection? That explained Dren's desperate rush to discredit her. If inspectors discovered his smuggling operation, his career and freedom would be finished. She retreated silently, mind racing. The data crystals weren't in her quarters. She'd been too cautious for that. They were hidden in her private research locker at the xenobiology lab. But now she needed to warn Eric about the inspection team and the increased urgency of their mission. As she hurried back toward their rendezvous point, Nilari found herself thinking not just of the evidence or the danger, but of the kiss they'd shared. In that moment of connection, she'd felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging, of being truly seen. It was ridiculous, of course. They'd known each other less than a day. They were different species with different worlds. And yet, there was something undeniably powerful between them, something worth exploring if they survived the next few hours. With renewed determination, she quickened her pace. The data crystals would expose Dren's corruption, the Confederacy inspectors would ensure justice was served, and then she and Eric would have time to discover what might exist between a human man and an alien woman who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. "A Confederacy inspection team?" Eric repeated, his brow furrowing as he processed Nilari's information. They had reunited at Alira's quarters, where Nilari had hastily explained what she'd overheard. That's either incredibly good timing or incredibly bad timing. "Both," Nilari said, pacing the small living area. She'd removed her disguise cap, allowing her silver-white hair to cascade freely around her shoulders. "Good because it means Dren will face justice if we succeed. Bad because he's desperate enough to do anything to stop us." Eric's eyes followed her movement, momentarily distracted by the graceful way she moved despite her agitation. He forced his thoughts back to their predicament. "The data crystals are in your research locker at the lab?" "Yes, hidden inside a specially modified specimen container. No one would think to look there." A slow smile spread across Eric's face. "I have an idea." He activated his wrist communicator, entering a complex encryption sequence. "This is a secure channel directly to my company's headquarters on New Terra. I need to speak with Director Hogan immediately." Nilari watched with fascination as Eric's demeanor shifted subtly, his posture straightening, his tone becoming more authoritative. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before, the confident business executive rather than the compassionate rescuer or the flirtatious companion. "Director Hogan," he said when the connection established, "I need a favor, a big one." The conversation that followed was brief but intense, with Eric explaining the situation in clipped professional terms. When he finished, he looked up at Nilari with triumph in his eyes. "It's done. Director Hogan is contacting Confederacy oversight. Within 2 hours, I'll be officially credentialed as a special consultant to tomorrow's inspection team, with authorization to conduct preliminary assessments." Nilari's violet eyes widened. "That's impressive. Your company has that kind of influence?" "Terran Extraction Technologies supplies 30% of the Confederacy's raw materials," Eric explained with a modest shrug. "We have some pull. Plus, Hogan owes me for saving his daughter from a rather embarrassing situation on Proxima Station last year." "You humans and your connections," Nilari said with admiration. "My people tend to be more insular." Speaking of your people, Eric said, moving closer to her, you never did tell me what that demonstration would involve, the one you mentioned earlier. The blue flush returned to Nilari's cheeks, visible even through the fading pigmentation mask. Are you sure this is the time to discuss interspecies intimacy protocols? We have 2 hours before my credentials come through, he replied with a grin, and I've always been a quick study. Their eyes locked, and the tension that had been building between them since their first meeting suddenly crystallized into something undeniable. Nilari took a step toward him, eliminating the remaining space between them. In my culture, she said softly, we believe that true connection happens here. She placed her hand at the base of his neck, her fingers gently pressing against his skin in a specific pattern. A tingling sensation spread from the point of contact, warm and pleasant. Neural pressure point, she explained. They create a feedback loop of sensation. The more pleasure one gives, the more one receives. Eric's breath caught as her fingers continued their gentle exploration. That's efficient. She laughed, the sound like music. Practical, yes, but lacking something, I think. Your human kiss. It was less precise, but somehow more affecting. Less technical, more emotional, he suggested, his hands finding her waist. Yes, my people pride themselves on control, on precision. Humans seem to embrace chaos, spontaneity. Is that a bad thing? He asked, drawing her closer. I'm beginning to think it's a wonderful thing, she whispered. What followed was a discovery of differences and similarities. Her skin slightly cooler than his, her responses sometimes unexpected. Their shared laughter when something didn't quite translate across species. They found their way to Elira's bedroom, where clothing was discarded and new territories explored with equal parts curiosity and passion. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head resting on his chest as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. The pigmentation mask had worn off in places, patches of emerald showing through the fading blue. That was, Eric searched for the right word. Scientifically fascinating, Nilari suggested with a teasing smile. I was going to say incredible, but sure, we can go with scientifically fascinating if you prefer the clinical approach. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face with those remarkable violet eyes. You know what truly fascinates me about humans? Your capacity to care so deeply, so quickly. My people take years to form the bonds you seem to forge in days or even hours. Is that what we've done? Formed a bond? Her expression grew serious. Haven't we? You risked yourself for me when I was nothing to you but a stranger in distress. You've continued risking yourself. And now this. She gestured to their entwined bodies. This isn't casual for me, Eric. It can't be. He reached up to touch her face, gently tracing the line of her jaw. It isn't casual for me either. I don't know what this is exactly, but I know it matters. The moment was interrupted by a chime from his communicator. Eric reluctantly pulled away to check the message. Credentials confirmed, he announced. I'm now officially Specialist Consultant Norton of the Confederacy Oversight Committee, authorized to conduct preliminary inspections of all research facilities. Nilari sat up, the sheet falling away as excitement overtook modesty. Then we can access the lab legally. We, Eric corrected gently, might be a problem. My credentials are for me alone. Her face fell momentarily before determination replaced disappointment. Then we'll need to get creative. I still have some of the pigmentation mask left. With the right uniform and attitude, Eric grinned, already admiring her quick thinking. I like the way you problem-solve, Doctor. Keltesh. You haven't seen anything yet, Specialist Consultant Norton, she replied with a matching smile. Now shall we get dressed and save my reputation? And put Dren behind bars, Eric added, reaching for his clothes. Can't forget that part. Oh, I haven't forgotten, Nilari said, her voice hardening slightly. Not a single moment of what he did to me. Eric paused, struck by the steel beneath her gentle exterior. This remarkable woman contained multitudes, intelligence, compassion, vulnerability, and strength, all wrapped in emerald skin and violet eyes that had somehow, against all odds, captured his heart in less than a day. The xenobiology lab occupied the eastern wing of the colony's research complex, a gleaming structure that stood in stark contrast to the utilitarian mining facilities surrounding it. Eric strode confidently toward the entrance, his newly minted Confederacy credentials displayed prominently on his chest. Beside him walked Nilari, once again disguised with a pigmentation mask, now wearing a crisp research assistant's uniform, borrowed from Alira's closet. "Remember," Eric murmured as they approached the security checkpoint, "your assistant researcher, Mina Talon, on loan from the Proxima Science Station. Let me do the talking." Nilari gave a slight nod, keeping her eyes appropriately downcast as would befit a junior researcher in the presence of a Confederacy official. The security guard, a burly draconian with scales that had seen better days, barely glanced at Eric's credentials before waving them through. "Confederacy's getting jumpy, sending advanced scouts," the guard grumbled. "Full inspection teams not due till tomorrow." "Preliminary assessment," Eric replied smoothly. "Standard procedure." The guard shrugged his massive shoulders. "Lab's on minimal staffing tonight. Most researchers got cleared out when the security alert went up." Eric and Nilari exchanged a quick glance. This was unexpected good fortune. Fewer people meant less chance of being recognized. They passed through the decontamination chamber and entered the main laboratory complex. The space was impressive. High ceilings, advanced equipment, and specimen containment units lining the walls. Most were empty now, but a few still housed exotic flora and small fauna from the planet's unexplored regions. "My locker is in the staff area," Nilari whispered. "Section C, through those doors." They had just started in that direction when a familiar voice called out from across the lab. "Can I help you?" Nilari froze, her back still to the speaker. Eric turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral as he faced Alira. Nilari's research assistant and supposed friend, whose quarters they had been using as a safe house. "Specialist Consultant Norton, Confederacy Oversight," Eric introduced himself formally. "This is Assistant Researcher Talon. We're conducting a preliminary assessment ahead of tomorrow's full inspection." Alira approached, her four-fingered hands clasped in front of her in a gesture of deference. She was a Vexari, like many of the colony's miners, with pale blue skin and delicate features. Her eyes, however, held a sharpness that put Eric immediately on edge. "What a surprise," she said, her tone pleasant but her gaze calculating. "We weren't expecting anyone from the Confederacy until tomorrow. I'm Elira Fenn, Senior Research Assistant. I'd be happy to show you around." "I thought most staff had been cleared out," Eric noted casually. "Most have," Elira confirmed. "But someone needs to maintain the critical specimens. I volunteered." Her gaze shifted to Nilari, who still had her back turned. "Your assistant seems familiar. Have we met before? Researcher Talon?" Nilari turned slowly, her disguised features revealing nothing. "I don't believe so. This is my first assignment to this sector." Elira studied her for a moment too long before smiling. "My mistake. Now, what specifically would you like to see first?" "We'll start with the staff research areas," Eric said firmly. "Specifically, I need to review the personal research lockers." A flicker of something, concern, alarm, crossed Elira's features before her professional smile returned. "Of course, right this way." As they followed Elira through the lab, Eric positioned himself slightly behind her, allowing him to exchange silent glances with Nilari. Something wasn't right. Elira's presence here, when she was supposed to be off-world for another day, was suspicious enough. Her overeager assistance only heightened his concerns. "Here we are," Elira announced, gesturing to a room lined with personal storage units. "Each researcher has their own secure locker. What exactly are you looking for?" "Standard compliance check," Eric replied vaguely. "We'll need a few minutes alone to conduct our assessment." Elira's smile tightened. "I'm afraid I can't leave you unattended in a secure area. Colony regulations." "Confederacy oversight supersedes colony regulations," Eric countered smoothly. "But if you insist on staying, perhaps you could help us. We need to access Dr. Keltesh's locker." At the mention of Nilari's name, Elira's composure slipped momentarily. "Dr. Keltesh is no longer with the research division. She's been reassigned. Nevertheless, her research falls within our inspection parameters," Eric insisted. Elira hesitated, then moved to a terminal. "I'll need to log this access officially." As she input commands, Eric caught Nilari's eye and gave a subtle nod toward Elira's back. Something about the assistant's behavior confirmed his suspicions. She was working with Dren. Nilari understood immediately. While Elira was distracted with the terminal, Nilari silently moved to her locker and entered her access code. The locker opened with a soft hiss, and she quickly scanned its contents. Her face fell. The specimen container where she'd hidden the data crystals was gone. "Looking for something specific?" Elira asked, suddenly right behind her. Nilari straightened, composing herself. "Just assessing organization protocols." Elira's eyes narrowed. "Strange. You accessed the code for Dr. Keltesh's locker with remarkable ease." Researcher Talon. She reached for her communicator. "Perhaps I should contact Security Chief Dren about this unusual inspection." Eric moved with surprising speed for his size, gently but firmly taking Elira's wrist before she could activate the communicator. "That won't be necessary." "Let go of me," Elira hissed, dropping all pretense of cooperation. "I know exactly who your assistant is. Did you think that pathetic disguise would fool me? I've worked with Nilari for months." "Where are the data crystals, Elira?" Nilari asked directly, removing the cap that had partially concealed her distinctive hair. "Why are you helping Dren?" Elira's expression hardened. "You always thought you were so special, didn't you? The brilliant Dr. Keltesh, with her prestigious education and groundbreaking research. Do you know how many years I've worked in this backwater colony while researchers like you come and go, taking all the credit?" "This isn't about professional rivalry," Eric interjected. "Dren is smuggling weapons. People could die." "People always die," Elira replied coldly. "At least this way, I get compensated for my troubles." "Where are the crystals?" Nilari repeated. A smug smile spread across Elira's face. "Somewhere you'll never find them. And in about 30 seconds, security will be swarming this lab. I triggered a silent alarm the moment you opened your locker." Eric released her wrist, his mind racing through options. "We need to go. Now." "It's too late," Elira said with satisfaction. "Dren's men are already on their way, and tomorrow when the real inspection team arrives, they'll find nothing but a disgraced researcher who tried to frame an honest security chief with fabricated evidence." Nilari's violet eyes flashed with anger. "You were my friend." "I was your assistant," Elira corrected bitterly. "There's a difference." The distant sound of boots on metal flooring confirmed Elira's warning. Security was approaching. Eric grabbed Nilari's hand, pulling her toward the door. "This isn't over," he told Elira firmly. "For you two?" she replied with a cold smile. "It very much is." They slipped out of the staff area just as the first security officers rounded the far corner of the main lab. Ducking behind a large specimen container, Eric pulled Nilari close. "We need another plan," he whispered. "Fast." Despite the danger, despite the betrayal, Nilari felt an unexpected surge of comfort from his nearness, from the steady determination in his eyes. In less than a day, this human had become her anchor in a storm of chaos. "I know where Elira would hide them," she whispered back, "but we'll need a distraction." Eric's lips curved into a confident smile that made her heart race despite their predicament. Distractions happen to be a human specialty. "I need you to trust me," Eric whispered, his lips so close to Nilari's ear that she could feel his warm breath against her skin. They were crouched behind a large specimen container, security forces searching the lab methodically just meters away. "Always," she replied without hesitation, surprising herself with how completely she meant it. Eric's eyes crinkled with a quick smile before his expression turned serious again. "When I give the signal, run for the maintenance access panel we passed on the way in. It should lead to the service tunnels." Before she could ask what signal, Eric stood up and strode confidently into the open, his Confederacy credentials prominently displayed. "Gentlemen," he called out to the security team, "I'm Specialist Consultant Norton with Confederacy Oversight. What seems to be the problem here?" The security officers, 4 burly aliens of various species, turned toward him in surprise. Their leader, a reptilian Sauran with scarred facial ridges, stepped forward. "We have reports of unauthorized personnel," the Sauran stated, eyeing Eric suspiciously. "That would be me," Eric replied smoothly. "My credentials were just processed today. Apparently your system hasn't updated yet." While he kept the security team's attention, Eric casually moved toward a control panel on the far wall. Nilari recognized it immediately, the emergency containment override. Her eyes widened as she realized his plan. "In fact," Eric continued, "I was just about to file my preliminary report on the laboratory safety protocols. Perhaps you gentlemen could assist me with a quick demonstration?" His hand hovered near the control panel. The security team was now fully focused on him, their backs to Nilari's hiding spot. "Sir, step away from that panel," the Soren ordered, his hand moving to his weapon. "Interesting response time," Eric noted casually, then slammed his palm down on the emergency release. But not quite fast enough. Chaos erupted instantly. Containment fields throughout the lab deactivated with a series of sharp hisses. Specimen containers opened, releasing a menagerie of small, harmless, but visually dramatic alien creatures. Fluorescent amphibians leaped across workstations. Iridescent insects swarmed in glittering clouds. Gelatinous organisms oozed along the floor. Alarms blared as the lab's biosecurity protocols activated. The security team scrambled to respond, completely forgetting about Eric in their panic. "Now!" Eric shouted to Nilari, who darted from her hiding place toward the maintenance access panel. They met at the panel, Eric quickly prying it open with a tool from his pocket. They slipped inside just as emergency containment shields began dropping throughout the lab, sealing off sections to prevent further contamination. "That was either brilliant or insane," Nilari gasped as they crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel. "The line between the two is pretty thin for humans," Eric replied with a grin. "Did you see where we need to go?" "Yes, before we left, I overheard one of the guards saying Dren ordered the package moved to his private shuttle. He's planning to run if things go badly tomorrow." "Then we're heading to the spaceport," Eric concluded. "But first we need to check Alira's quarters. If I were hiding stolen evidence, I'd keep it close." The maintenance tunnels formed a labyrinthine network throughout the research complex. Nilari, familiar with the layout from her time working there, guided them confidently through the dim passages. They emerged from an access panel in a residential corridor not far from Alira's assigned quarters. "Security will be focused on the lab breach," Eric noted as they hurried down the empty hallway. "But we don't have much time before they expand the search." Alira's quarters were similar to her friends that they'd been using as a safe house, but more sparsely decorated. Nilari went straight to a small desk in the corner. "Alira always kept her most valuable possessions in a hidden compartment here," she explained, her fingers finding a nearly invisible seam in the desk's surface. With practiced movements, she triggered the release mechanism. A small drawer slid open, revealing several data crystals nestled in protective foam. "These are mine," Nilari confirmed, quickly examining them. "All the evidence against Dren is here." "She didn't take them to him yet," Eric observed. "Why risk keeping them?" "Insurance," Nilari realized. Alira was playing both sides. If Dren turned on her, she'd have leverage. A colony-wide announcement interrupted their speculation, the automated voice echoing through the corridors. "Attention all personnel. Biohazard containment breach in Research Sector C. All non-essential personnel are ordered to evacuate to designated safety zones. Security checkpoints are being established at all major intersections." "We need to move," Eric urged, helping Nilari secure the crystals in a small pouch. "The spaceport will be our best chance to intercept Dren before he escapes." They returned to the maintenance tunnels, now heading toward the colony's external sectors. The passages grew narrower and rougher as they moved away from the main complex, eventually connecting with the actual mining tunnels that formed the colony's foundation. "These tunnels should bypass the security checkpoints," Nilari explained as they navigated the dimly lit passages. "They lead directly to the auxiliary maintenance bay, adjacent to the spaceport." As they moved deeper into the mining section, the air grew warmer and carried the distinct mineral tang of freshly excavated ore. Their progress slowed as they had to climb over equipment and squeeze through tight spaces never meant for regular transit. During one such tight passage, Eric found himself pressed close against Nilari in the confined space, their bodies aligned from chest to thigh. Despite the urgency of their mission, he became acutely aware of her. The subtle scent of her skin, the warmth of her body against his, the way her violet eyes reflected the minimal emergency lighting. "Sorry," he murmured, trying to shift to give her more space. "Don't be," she replied softly, making no move to increase the distance between them. "I find I rather enjoy being close to you, even in these circumstances." Their eyes met in the dim light, and for a moment, the danger, the pursuit, the entire mission faded into the background. There was only this connection, unexpected, powerful, transcending their different origins. "When this is over," Eric said, his voice rough with emotion, "I want to show you Earth. The oceans, the forests, the cities, all of it." "I'd like that," she replied, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Though I should warn you, my people consider accepting such an invitation tantamount to a formal courtship declaration." Even in the dim light, she could see his smile. "I'm counting on it." The intimate moment was shattered by a distant rumble that shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. They pulled apart, instantly alert. "What was that?" Eric asked. Nilari's expression darkened. "That sounded like a shuttle engine igniting in the pre-launch sequence. We need to hurry." They increased their pace, pushing through the final stretch of mining tunnels until they reached a maintenance hatch marked with spaceport service symbols. Eric helped Nilari through, then followed her into what appeared to be a storage area filled with spare parts and fuel cells. Through a large viewport, they could see the spaceport's main landing pad. A sleek private shuttle was indeed powering up, its engines glowing with building energy. A small group of figures was boarding, and at their center was the unmistakable form of Security Chief Bareth Dren. "We're too late," Nilari breathed. "He's leaving." Eric's jaw set with determination. "No, he's not. Not while I have anything to say about it." He pulled out his communicator and activated the emergency Confederacy channel. "This is Specialist Consultant Norton. Security Chief Dren is attempting to flee the colony with evidence of weapon smuggling. Request immediate lockdown of all departure bays." As the communicator crackled with acknowledgement, Eric turned to Nilari with fierce intensity in his eyes. "This ends now. One way or another, we're going to finish what we started when I put that coat around your shoulders." The spaceport's emergency lockdown engaged with a thunderous clang of metal. Massive security doors slammed shut across the launch bays, trapping Dren's shuttle on the pad. Red warning lights bathed the area in an ominous glow as sirens wailed throughout the facility. "Lockdown protocols engaged," announced an automated voice. "All launches suspended by Confederacy override." Through the viewport, Eric and Nilari watched as Dren emerged from his shuttle, face contorted with rage. He barked orders at his security team, who fanned out with weapons drawn. Two officers grabbed nearby maintenance workers, using them as shields. "He's taking hostages," Nilari said, her voice tight with concern. Eric's communicator crackled. "Specialist Norton, this is Captain Hogan of the Confederacy Vessel Arbiter. We're on approach to your position, ETA 12 minutes. "Understood, Captain," Eric replied. "Be advised, Security Chief Dren has taken hostages and is attempting to flee with evidence of weapon smuggling." "Copy that. Maintain your position until—" The transmission cut off as a stray blaster shot hit a nearby communication relay, showering them with sparks. Eric pulled Nilari away from the viewport just as Dren's voice boomed over the spaceport's announcement system. "Attention colony personnel. This is Security Chief Dren. The lockdown is the result of a terrorist action. Anyone interfering with security operations will be treated as hostile. All civilians are ordered to return to their quarters immediately." "He's trying to control the narrative," Eric muttered. Nilari's eyes narrowed with determination. "Not for long. Look." Beyond the security perimeter, a crowd was gathering. Miners, technicians, service workers, all watching the unfolding drama. Word had spread quickly about the confrontation, and with each passing minute, more colonists arrived. Their expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile toward Dren and his officers. "I recognize some of them," Nilari said. "They were there when I was humiliated." Eric squeezed her hand supportively. "And now they're here to see justice done." A commotion near the shuttle drew their attention. Dren was shouting at his officers, gesturing wildly at the control panel. Despite the lockdown, he was attempting to override the system and launch anyway. "He's desperate," Nilari observed. "If he can get that shuttle into orbit, he might be able to rendezvous with his smuggling contacts before the Confederacy intercepts him." Eric studied the layout of the maintenance bay. "There's an access tunnel that leads directly to the pad. If I can get close enough, I might be able to negotiate." "Or I could confront him," Nilari suggested, her violet eyes flashing. "This began with me. It should end with me." Before Eric could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the spaceport. Dren had detonated charges on the security doors, blasting a hole large enough for his shuttle to squeeze through. "He's going to make a run for it," Eric realized, "and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process." As if confirming his assessment, Dren's next announcement echoed through the facility. "Final warning. Anyone attempting to prevent my departure will be considered a threat to colony security. I am authorized to use lethal force." The gathered crowd of colonists responded with jeers and shouts of defiance. Several miners armed with industrial tools moved toward the damaged security doors. "They're going to try to stop him," Nalari gasped. Eric made a split-second decision. "Upload the data from those crystals to my communicator. Now." As Nalari complied, Eric established a direct link to the approaching Confederacy vessel. "Captain Hogan, we're transmitting evidence of Dren's crimes. The situation is escalating. Civilians are at risk." "Received, Specialist. We're increasing speed, but we're still 8 minutes out." "That might be too late," Eric replied grimly. Through the viewport, they could see Dren boarding his shuttle again, leaving his security team to hold off the increasingly bold colonists. The shuttle's engines flared brighter as pre-launch sequences accelerated. "He's going to make it," Nilari said, despair creeping into her voice. Eric's expression hardened with resolve. "No, he's not." With quick, precise movements, he accessed the maintenance bay's control panel and initiated an emergency override sequence. Alarms blared as the system recognized his Confederacy credentials. "What are you doing?" Nilari asked. "Something probably against regulations," he admitted with a grim smile, "but definitely human." On the launch pad, Dren's shuttle began to rise, maneuvering toward the blasted security doors. But before it could reach the exit, massive fuel-loading arms swung into position, blocking its path. The shuttle veered sharply to avoid a collision, its port stabilizer clipping one of the arms. The impact sent the shuttle into a spin, forcing it back down onto the pad with a bone-jarring crash. It remained intact but was clearly disabled, smoke pouring from the damaged engine. The colonists seized the moment. Led by a grizzled mining foreman, they swarmed past the confused security officers and surrounded the downed shuttle. Dren emerged, blaster in hand, but faced with dozens of angry colonists, even he recognized the futility of resistance. "It's over, Dren," the foreman called out. "We've had enough of your corruption." Nilari squeezed Eric's hand. "We should go down there. Make sure this ends properly." They hurried through the maintenance bay and emerged onto the launch pad just as Dren was being restrained by his own former security officers, who had quickly switched allegiance when they saw which way the wind was blowing. "You!" Dren snarled when he spotted Nilari. "This is all your fault, you green-skinned—" "That's enough," Eric interrupted, stepping protectively in front of her. "Security Chief Barath Dren, by the authority of the Confederacy Oversight Committee, you're under arrest for corruption, weapons smuggling, abuse of power, and attempted kidnapping." A cheer went up from the gathered colonists. The foreman approached, nodding respectfully to Eric and Nilari. "We should have stood up to him long ago," the miner admitted gruffly. "It took a human to show us how. And it took seeing what he did to Dr. Keltesh to make us finally act," added another colonist. "No one deserves what he did to you, Doctor. We're sorry we didn't help sooner." Nilari's eyes glistened with emotion. "Thank you," she said simply. The distant roar of engines announced the arrival of the Confederacy vessel Arbiter. As it descended toward the secondary landing pad, Captain Hogan's voice came over Eric's communicator. "Impressive work, Specialist Norton. The evidence you transmitted is conclusive. Dren will face a Confederacy tribunal for his crimes." "What about Elira?" Nilari asked quietly. "She'll be arrested too," Eric assured her, "but her cooperation might earn her leniency." As Confederacy officers took custody of Dren, the crowd began to disperse. The crisis was over, justice would be served, and the colony could begin healing from Dren's corrupt leadership. In the relative quiet that followed, Eric turned to Nilari. "Are you all right?" She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Better than all right. For the first time since I arrived on this colony, I feel free." Eric reached out, gently tucking a strand of silver-white hair behind her ear. "What will you do now?" "I've been offered a position on the Arbiter," she revealed. "Captain Hogan was impressed by my research and wants me to join their xenobiology team." "That's wonderful," Eric said, genuinely happy for her, but unable to hide a hint of disappointment. Nilari stepped closer, her violet eyes meeting his. "I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first." "With me?" "You did invite me to Earth," she reminded him. "A formal courtship declaration by my people's standards." Eric smiled, drawing her into his arms. "I meant every word." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I've requested a transfer to the Confederacy Science Division on Earth instead. If they approve it." "They will," Eric assured her. "And if they don't, Terran Extraction Technologies has an excellent xenobiology department that would be lucky to have you." Her laugh was like music. "Is that your professional assessment specialist consultant?" "It's my personal guarantee," he replied before kissing her tenderly. As they parted, Nylari's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, in my culture, there's a saying, the greatest journeys begin with a single act of kindness." "Is that so?" Eric asked, intrigued. She nodded, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "When you placed your coat around my shoulders that day, you didn't just cover my nakedness. You restored my dignity, my hope. You saw me as a person deserving of respect when everyone else saw only a spectacle." "It was the right thing to do," Eric said simply. "And that," Nylari replied with a smile that lit up her entire face, "is why humans like you are so remarkable. You act from the heart, without calculation or expectation of reward." As the Confederacy officers finished securing the area, Captain Hogan approached them. "We'll be departing for the central hub in 3 hours, Dr. Keltesh. Will you be joining us?" Nylari looked at Eric, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Captain. We both will." "We?" Hogan raised an eyebrow. "I believe my company would be interested in establishing a more ethical mining operation here," Eric explained smoothly. "With your permission, I'd like to accompany you to present my proposal to Confederacy leadership." The captain smiled knowingly. "Of course, Specialist Norton. We'd be honored to have you aboard." As Hogan departed, Nylari leaned against Eric, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "So, it seems our journey together is just beginning." Eric wrapped his arm around her waist, holding her close. "I can't think of a better traveling companion." Above them, the stars were becoming visible as the colony's day cycle ended. Countless worlds waiting to be explored together, their future as bright and promising as the cosmos itself.